I'm a new mom, had my son 5 weeks ago. My husband's parents have been staying with us and things have been super overwhelming. Mill has a habit of taking the baby and refusing to give him back to me. She'd say I'm deliberately ruining her time with him. My son needs feeding every 2 hours and she basically makes me beg her to hand him over to me so I could feed. Last night at 10 p.m. Mill had my son in her arms while sitting on the couch with my husband and his dad. I was exhausted, the baby started crying. I told my Mill to hand him over to me so I could feed him. She refused and I kept asking. My husband starts talking about what a whiny little girl I was to complain that our son is receiving love and cuddles and how I'm using feeding as an excuse to keep the baby away from his mom. I ignored him and told his mom to hand over the baby. She refused and said I needed to wait a little longer. I got angry at this point. My husband said I could take the baby after I asked his mom nicely. This had me seething. I meanly told his mom to stop being annoying and overbearing and hand him over to me. She looked at me shocked and hurt. She handed the baby over and ran into the guest room and my husband gave me a look, then followed her and stayed inside to comfort her. He came into the room while I was feeding my son and started yelling about how disrespectful I was to speak to his mom this way and treat her poorly when all she's doing is showing our son more love than I do. I told him about how she's been taking the baby for hours and preventing me from feeding him properly. He said that 1, our son isn't an object for me to act like I own him, and 2, his mom was doing nothing wrong, and 3, I should have asked nicely instead of being an idiot to his mom and making her cry. I started crying and yelled that I'd go to my mom's place if his parents stay any longer, and he yelled back saying, "Shut the hell up, you're only acting up cause you don't want my parents around. What the hell is wrong with you?" Then walked out. I felt terrible thinking maybe I was rude to his mom, but I also think that I'd hit my limits here. Am I the idiot for not asking her nicely like my husband wanted? Not the idiot at all, and I'm very alarmed at your husband calling you a whiny little girl for trying to feed your child. And then attempting to prevent him from being fed even when he was crying until you asked his mother nicely for permission to feed your own child. You seriously need to evaluate if this is a safe environment for your child to be raised in. You are under such stress both emotionally and physically. I think having an actual loving, supportive environment is the best thing for both you and your child. Take your child, go to your mom, and actually see how you're supposed to be treated by someone who actually loves you. Your husband is an abusive idiot. Please, for the sake of your child, don't let that become the norm of their life. Not the idiot. Not the idiot. Your baby is only 5 weeks old. Your Mill and husband are way out of line. If she really wants to help, she should cook and clean and make sure you and baby are comfortable, not fight with you and demand that the baby isn't ready for you. Your husband's behavior is also extremely troubling. You should go to your mother's for a week to get away. I, 28, have been married to my husband, 30, for 2 years, and we've been together for almost 10. I love my in-laws and have never had an issue with them, at least before I was pregnant with my first baby. My Mill has one other daughter, let's call her Jane, but she lives across state. She has 2 boys and is done having kids. She lives close to her Mill and the boys are pretty close to her, which obviously causes some jealousy issues with my Mill. My whole pregnancy was one big guilt trip about how she never got to be there for Jane for her pregnancy. She would touch my belly or get really close to it to talk to the baby. I would tell my husband that it made me uncomfortable, and while he was understanding, he also felt bad for his mom too and reminded me about how she missed many moments with Jane. During the last couple months of my pregnancy, we made the decision to move in with my in-laws to save money for a house. This made my Mill so happy. She kept telling everyone she was excited for the baby to come home to her. I let those comments slide for a while but finally had to confront her after my baby shower. My parents bought us a crib and nursery decorations from our registry, and my Mill made a joke to my mom how good everything is going to look in her, my Mill, room. And that she's basically going to be our live-in nanny. My mom has never had any reason to dislike my in-laws, but these comments were very off-putting. I had to sit down with my Mill about boundaries, and she started crying and said she just wanted to feel close to at least one of her grandchildren. I tried not bringing up the topic after that, but she didn't make it easy. The thing that gets me upset the most is the constant need to have all the baby firsts. She wants to be the first to do everything, and it's so hard to tell her no. Until one day. She waited until I left the room at dinner time. When I came back, my husband excitedly told me how much the baby loves mashed potatoes and that my Mill gave her a small spoonful and she went nuts. My Mill said you weren't supposed to tell her it was grandma's little secret. I snapped. I said that's my child and there will be no secrets no matter how small. Things got tense and I got called dramatic and that she's allowed to have grandma moments with my child, whatever the hell that means. I think my last straw is this. My husband and I have just been approved for our loan and will be signing papers on a house soon, about 45 minutes away from my in-laws. Lately she's been going on about how it's unfair to her and how she doesn't know how to handle her baby being so far away. She's jokingly brought up suing for grandparents' rights or about setting up her new room. I wouldn't be so upset if it was one or two jokes, but after hearing about it daily, it's starting to feel less like a joke and more like she wants to take my baby. Am I the idiot for wanting to have another sit down? Be clear with your husband that while you appreciate most things that your Mill has done, there are specific things she has done or said that have made you uncomfortable. Give clear examples like you have here and say that you need him to work with you to set and maintain clear and reasonable boundaries. Together, be clear with your Mill that her role as a grandparent does not make her a co-parent. Whatever you say will go in one ear and out the other. Don't bother having a talk with your Mill. Have a talk with your husband instead. You need to be very specific with your husband about your boundaries with Mill. Discuss them in detail. Make sure he understands and agrees, or find a compromise. You can even strategize about how to handle Mill when, not if, she crosses these boundaries, like when she shows up unannounced and offers or demands that you two go out and let her babysit for a few hours. Not the idiot. I'd be having a sit down with you, your husband, your Mill, and if she's married, her husband, and laying down the ground rules. If Mill doesn't abide by them, she gets put in a timeout until she learns to respect her role as grandmother, not mother. The threats of suing for grandparents' rights is highly dependent on the state y'all live in, but until she knocks off the threats, I'd limit the hell out of the time she got to spend with the baby. My mom and I have a very complicated relationship, to put it lightly. Over the past few years, my relationship with her has slowly dwindled until now we barely speak to each other. After we moved houses, I did not tell my mom the new address. My wife and I have been married for 6 years and have a 4-year-old daughter together. My mom doesn't like my wife. They've only met a handful of times, but my mom cannot go a few minutes without making a snarky comment or insulting her. She's also only met my daughter 3 times, and continually suggests that my daughter isn't mine. 2 nights ago, my wife and I went on a date. It was the most fun I think I've had in ages, and it was fun to just get out of the house and experience something new. My daughter was staying with my in-laws, so we didn't have to worry about her bedtime. We ended up getting home at around 1 a.m. When we arrived, we found my mom sitting by my front door. My wife and I are very confused. We thought that she didn't know where we lived, so it's especially confusing when she's here at 1 a.m. Immediately when she sees us, she starts yelling at the both of us for being neglectful parents and not being home. This only added to our confusion. She says that she came to our house at 8 p.m. to visit her grandchild, and was left waiting for hours. She says that she couldn't call because she lost her phone, but she was so worried that we had left our daughter in the house by herself, so worried that she was going to walk to a police station. It took almost 10 minutes to explain that my daughter was safe. It was too late to send her in an Uber, so we decided to let her spend the night. She was refusing to answer any of our basic questions. How did she find out where we lived? How did she get all this way without a car and no phone? Etc. Instead of answering, she would start screaming, like throwing a tantrum, and claim that we were causing more stress than needed on an already stressful night. I think my wife and I were both too tired to keep pushing for answers. My wife offered to make her something to eat, and when she was asked about any allergy and preferences, she assured my wife that she would eat anything. She wouldn't. My wife made some rice, chicken stew, and some vegetables. My mom spit it out on the floor and told my wife to make her a grilled cheese, like a good little idiot. I was upstairs preparing the guest bedroom, so I did not hear this, but my wife tells me how offended she was. She ended up making the sandwich, mostly to avoid a big argument. After all that, I told my mom that I wanted her gone by 6 a.m. If she didn't leave, I would have no problem dragging her out myself. She took offense to this and cursed my wife out, but eventually went to sleep. At 6 a.m., I woke her up, and as promised, I kicked her out. She tried to resist, but I managed. My wife, though she agreed with the original plan, thought I might have been a little too harsh. Am I the idiot? This whole thing is weird. Why would she assume your child was left in the house alone? How did she get there? How did she know where you live? You were far more accommodating to her than you needed to be. You didn't need to let her stay at all. The woman spit out food onto your floor and called your wife an idiot after demanding she make her a sandwich. The door should have hit her on the butt on her way out right then. Not the idiot. I probably would have called the police and had her held on a psych hold. Clearly, she isn't of sound mind to sit outside your house for 5 hours just to yell at you and accuse you of leaving your 4-year-old child at home alone. Makes plenty of sense why you don't talk to her. You let your mother in your home after she found out where you live, showed up unannounced, threatened you and insinuated you are bad parents? Then let her spend the night after she told your wife to be a good little idiot? I would have thrown hands and kicked her out instantly. You guys need a restraining order. Not the idiot, but you need to set firmer boundaries. My husband and I each had separate vehicles until about a year ago. His car crapped out. He's a mechanic, so he's slowly been fixing up a car someone wanted to junk. Because I work from home and don't go anywhere during the day, I let him take my car to work. This was a used car that he had fixed up for me, so we owned it outright. It worked out fine, until this past February. My husband was working late. He left the car unlocked, with the keys in the car. While he was inside his shop, distracted, someone came and stole it. There was a security camera, but they couldn't catch the face clearly. From what I can tell, they probably cased the place and figured my husband left the car like this. He was apologetic, though was also quick to make excuses. Our city has had a heightened rate of carjackings, with police making PSs saying to lock your cars, don't leave anything valuable in there, etc. It's very likely they would have tried to steal it regardless. I let it go because there was nothing we could really do about it. Arguing would do little. We filed a police report, as well as one with the insurance company. The police never found the car. It was likely scrapped somewhere. Eventually, we got a check from the insurance company. It wasn't nearly enough to get a new car, and financially, we just couldn't swing another. My husband would walk to work as it's only 15 minutes on foot. He continued to work on the car he's been working on, but really doesn't have the time with paying jobs. We have to take Ubers or public transport to get anywhere else. I recently got a promotion at work that came with a salary bump. I could afford a lease on a car. My husband agreed to this. We have a joint account that we each contribute to, as well as separate personal accounts. I used money from my personal account to put a down payment. I love my new car. It's the first time I've ever leased one versus buying used from someone I knew or having my husband fix up a clunker. I made it clear to my husband from the start that this was my car and I don't feel comfortable with him taking it to his work anymore or driving it unless I'm in the car. I park it in our locked garage every night. He agreed, fine with walking or I'll drive him, picking him up. He's planned on going on a fishing trip with some friends and asked if he could bring my car. I told him no. He was confused, saying he thought I'd be over it by now. I told him I wasn't and I didn't trust it wouldn't happen again. He got mad and said he's always let me borrow his cars in the past when needed. I pointed out that I'm always responsible when driving his vehicles. I lock up and keep the keys on me. He told me this was bullcrap, but I didn't relent. He left for his trip today, a friend picking him up. This friend told me that it was going to be cramped with the other guys and all their gear. Am I the idiot? No idiots here. I'd be interested to know if this was a recurring problem. You have mentioned you don't trust him anymore, but if it was a fluke then I think this would be a forgive and forget moment. Oftentimes people get complacent and it takes a stressful event, car getting stolen, to make them pay attention to locking their car wherever they go. Although this doesn't make you an idiot, you both are married and even if he's not paying for the car, letting him borrow it every once in a while, especially when you aren't using it, should be a no-brainer. I get not wanting to have your car stolen again, but if you are planning on making it a while with him you have to move on and trust him. Not the idiot. Sorry, but this is a prime case of forgive and remember, so that the mistake is not repeated. It is your car, and you paid for it from your personal account. That alone would be enough of a reason. Add on that if he were to take it, you'd have no vehicle available should you need to go anywhere yourself, while he is gone. Another good reason to say no. And the final reason, the one you've given here, is that he has already shown that he has a tendency to leave cars unlocked with keys in them. Not that this would have necessarily stopped the car theft, but it still could have hindered it enough to be noticed sooner. Not the idiot, I'd be willing to bring up the fool me once saying for this one. He was trusted with the car and he broke that trust by leaving it extremely vulnerable in an area he knows has a high crime rate for car theft. He doesn't get the car again in my book. Especially since he was making excuses and didn't just say yep I messed up and I'm truly sorry. Let me help make this up to you.